You kind of touched on this earlier, but I wanted to get a little bit deeper into it, which is I've reached a kind of a financial plateau, and even though it's successful for me, I want to get beyond it without having to ask over and over again. Instead of, I don't want to stay in the step one process over and over again.
Well, you know the reason that manifestation doesn't move to a more desired place? Manifestation has the majority of your attention, and the new place doesn't have enough of your attention, that's all. In other words, we started out today by saying that what is what most people are focused upon. When you're driving, it wouldn't go well if you're just looking where you are, would it? It's good that and sometimes when people hear us say that, even though we're saying it about them and about the energy that we feel about the subject, they don't really believe it because their desire is so poignant within them. They're sure that they're spending more time thinking about what they want than about where they are. But when you're thinking and speaking more about where you're going in terms of manifestation than where you are in terms of manifestation, it shifts.
Understood. Same thing with relationships.
That was easy.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming the same thing with relationships is probably the case. Back in the world.
Well, we are playing with you. We're happy to talk with you about the details of it. Let's talk about whatever you want to talk about, and let's shift some energy. Let's demonstrate how to focus upon where you're going more than where you are. Yes?
Okay. I have a couple of projects that I'm working on. One of them is, they're all IT related, technology related. And it seems I can feel it, I can see it. I mean, I know it, I can manifest it. It just seems to take different turns consistently, it doesn't quite get to where I want it to be. So of course I get frustrated and I just take a step back.
Well, when we speak to someone who has a physical condition, we say to them, the physical condition, this manifestation, is nothing more than an indicator of your vibration. But when you think about it, whatever is manifesting, in other words, the condition of your project, is a manifestational indicator of vibration. So we say to the person who has the disease label assigned to them, how does this vibrational indicator feel? And if they can tell us what the disease or the manifestation, how it's causing them to emotionally feel, then we say, if you will pay attention, you will realize that that feeling was present even before the indicator called the disease, called the manifestation, which is what the manifestation is about. So now let's just say that everything that is current reality is a manifestational indicator of where vibration is. So how does the current state of the project feel? Well, it feels slow going. It feels frustrating. It feels stagnated. Are we using accurate words?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So then you just have to acknowledge that you've been feeling that way for a while. And so this brings us around to the topic that we've been discussing quite a bit here today. How can I feel different than the manifestation deserves? In other words, how can I feel different than what I've got makes me feel? How can I do other than have a knee-jerk response to what is?
All right.
And we say, well, you have to look forward. You have to think about who you really are, and where the manifestation is going, and where the vibration really is. It really is. It's not a weight and balance thing. It is a time in the broadcast thing. In other words, if you're thinking more about what's in the vibrational reality and less about what's manifested, then this gets more of your airtime, which means it gets more of your vibrational attention, which means it has less resistance in it, which means the vortex of creation can bring you into it. It really is. We often beat the drum. We beat the drum to indicate attention to a subject, what kinds of things do you commonly hear yourself say? We think you would describe yourself as optimistic, but we also think that you describe yourself as observant and factual.
Right. Yeah, I might sometimes pay attention too much to what is, like you're saying.
Well, it's sort of a byproduct of your technological genius, isn't it? In other words, if you present to some business enterprise a dream that you have, and they say, what science can you back it up with? You would say, oh, there's no science yet, it's just a dream. And they would say, come back when you have some science. Right. In other words, it's sort of the thing that slows things down. You're in a position where you can't leap physically into a new technology. You have to bridge into it. But we think it's fine to do your bridging with the reality action that you do, but you want to do more leaping with your thoughts, more imagery, more imagining. In other words, even when you might not know right now how or exactly when and so on, how, where, when, who. If you focus upon why do I want this, and why do I think it's possible, and what will it feel like, and won't it be nice when, and isn't it nice that? When you focus upon the results of what you are reaching for, is there something specific that you want to bring about that you're hung up on, or are you waiting for the ideas to flow?
No, I'd like to manifest this particular project so I can move on to other things. I want to create a lot more things, and this I know is the kind of the stepping stone to many other things, in a sense. But at the same time, it's a little, it gets cloudy and it's clear. It gets cloudy, it's clear. It gets cloudy, gets clear.
Cloudy for you. The path.
The path, yeah. So sometimes it looks very clear, and I know exactly where I'm going, and sometimes it seems to, I seem to lose a little bit of enthusiasm because I lose my way a little bit. So.
Well, do you think that you spend more time feeling the advantage of it, or more time feeling the disappointment of it, or is it a sort of?
It's kind of 50-50.
And that's why you're not moving.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. Airtime. I want it, but I want it, but I want it, but I want it, but there's. I want it, but I want it, but I want it, but I want it, but now you're gaining. You see. Want to talk about it in specific?
I'm trying to, I guess, not necessarily, because I think I'm getting the point of it. Even though I understand the concept, a lot of times I tend to deviate from it.
Well, what's going on is really vivid, and you've been trained, many of you have, for a very long time, to face reality, and you are reluctant to depart from it. But that's why we do the sales job that we do, to convince you that reality doesn't mean diddly squat, and that where it's at is over here in this vapor, over here in this vibrational vortex. And as you reach, hopefully, into that, it will shift for you. So you just want to, if you want to gain some ground, just step into a more general place and say things to yourself like, I know it's going to work out, I just don't know exactly how. And because I feel this strong about it, I'm sure about it. And the timing of it is not so important, because there's plenty of time. And it's going to be sooner than it is later, so I think I'll just chill. And I've come a long way, and so I know it's going to be all right. And I know so much about this that it just has to unfold for me. And it's only right that it does. In other words, now these are very general statements, but they feel good when you say them, and they have no resistance in them as you focus upon them. So if you can find a series of things that make you feel good, evidence or example of something that felt blocked up before that broke loose and gave you what you wanted. You have many examples like that. And as you activate those, then you just put yourself in that free-flowing attitude, and then it flows freely.
I understand. I just have a little trouble just talking to myself all the time, so just in that method, in that way.
Well, would you find yourself an encouraging person or a discouraging person?
Encouraging.
So if someone if someone was discouraged, would you encourage them?
Yes.
So why not the same for you?
Just seems weird.
The housekeeper knocked on the door at the suite where Jerry and Esther are staying. And they have 2 adjoining suites, and so they can spread out all over the place. And she knocked on the door where Jerry is, and he barely answered it because he didn't have his pants on. And he didn't linger there because he didn't have his pants on. And Esther heard him. Well, now he has his pants on. And Esther heard him speaking cheerfully to whoever it was, but didn't go see what was going on. And then she knocked on the door close to where Esther was standing, and Esther opened the door, and she started to explain. Esther said, "We don't need any assistance or service today." And she started to explain. She said, "That man," and she was going to speak negatively about that man. And Esther said, "Who is my husband?" And he didn't have his pants on. And she said, "Oh." And Esther said, we don't require anything in either of these rooms. And the woman was so relieved that she didn't have to clean these 2 rooms. She's in this place of more work than energy, and more to do than time to do it. And Esther gave her a hug and thanked her for her work and gave her a tip. And in other words, Esther did everything that she could think of in the minute and a half that she was interacting with her that she could do to bolster the way this woman felt. In other words, you are uplifters in nature, and it comes so easily to you with others. We just want you to afford the same kind and gentle courtesies to yourself more of the time. Give yourself a break. You're hard on you. You're harder on you than you are everybody else put together.
Yes, I am. A few more questions? Okay, so this one dives a little deeper. If everything is vibration, as you say, from our muscles to our bones to our skin to everything, how do we retain our energy, our youthful spirit through vibration? I mean, it's one thing to conceptually think about it, visualize it, but there's so much interaction that happens around us that it's hard to keep that vibration, saying, I'd like to live a couple 100 years now that I'm getting this whole game, this whole law of attraction thing going. It's kind of fun. I don't want to, I want to create more, I want to do more, I want to be more, and it's just, I don't want to be limited to a limited amount of time and space or things of that nature. And it seems the concept appears tangible, but actually manifested seems to be more distant or more difficult.
Well, the thing about your question is, as well-spoken as you are, and you asked that question from outside the vortex. It was a sort of shortage perspective of, I don't want to not be able to be here as long as I'd like to be here. So when you ask the same question from inside the vortex, now you are so in alignment with the life-giving energy that you can maintain or sustain. But the only way that you can maintain or sustain is by expanding and allowing. In other words, what causes a shortness of life is either not enough contrast, which causes you to ask, and we don't see that happening in your culture, or so much contrast that you're asking, but not enough focus to keep up with it. In other words, the only thing that causes a diminishment of life experience, we're ringing just a little bit. The only thing that causes a diminishment of life experience is expanding further than you're allowing or not expanding. And since this time-space reality is insisting on the expansion, then it's the holding back. So what we're getting at is, as you stand in the vortex, in other words, when you are tuned in to this energy and feeling frisky, that feeling of being high on life, that feeling of adventure, that feeling of wanting more, that's an in the vortex feeling. And as you maintain that feeling, then what you're asking for will continue. In other words, if this environment continues to inspire you to want, and you use your guidance system in a way that keeps you in alignment with what you've asked for, you're right. You could continue in a youthful appearance and feeling, even though you are moving through time. You do not have to disintegrate as you move through time. You do not have to diminish as you move through time. What causes the diminishment is resistance that's picked up along the physical trail.